An incision was placed from the vertex of the forehead to the tip of the nose, which continued up till the symphysis menti and slightly downwards. Then a coronal incision was placed in front of the auricle to the root of the zygoma, circling the eye. Another horizontal incision was placed from the angle of the mouth to the posterior border of the mandible. The lower flap was deflected downwards to the lower border of the mandible, and the upper flap was reflected backwards to the auricle. We then proceeded to remove the superficial fascia of the face. The face does not have a deep fascia except at the parotid and the mesenteric regions, referred to as the parieto-mesenteric fascia. So far we have exposed the temporal branch of the facial nerve, which accompanies the superficial temporal artery, the zygomatic branch, the parotid duct, above and below which you have the upper and lower buccal branches, the marginal mandibular branch of the facial nerve, which runs parallel to the inferior border of the mandible, the cervical branch which supplies the platysma. The platysma has been reflected to expose the cervical branch which supplies it. Here we are removing the rest of the parotid gland as piecemeal to expose the facial nerve branches of the face originating from it. Extreme caution must be taken during parotidectomy, as the facial nerve branches may be injured during the removal of the parotid gland. After coming out of the cranial cavity through the stylomastoid foramen, the facial nerve winds around the lateral aspect of the styloid process, enters the parotid gland, after which it divides into two major trunks, the temporofacial trunk and the cervicofacial trunk. The temporofacial trunk further divides into temporal and zygomatic branches, whereas the cervicofacial trunk gives the buccal, marginal mandibular and the cervical branches. These branches emerge in the face, radiating through the anterior border of the parotid gland and supply the muscles of facial expression. These 5 sets of terminal branches form a goose foot pattern called as pes anseriens. Temporal branch supplies the upper part of orbicularis oculi, frontalis, and the corrugator supercilii. Zygomatic branch which supplies the lower part of orbicularis oculi. The buccal branches, the upper buccal branch which supplies the zygomaticus major and minor, levator anguli oris, levator labii superioris, levator labii superioris aliquanesi, and the muscles of the nose. The lower buccal branch supplies the buccinator and the orbicularis oris. The marginal mandibular branch supplies the risorius, depressor anguli oris, depressor labii inferioris, and mentalis. The cervical branch supplies the platysma. The facial nerve trunk, the temporofacial trunk, and the temporal and the zygomatic branches coming from it, the upper and lower buccal branch above and below the parotid duct, which is a part of the cervicofacial trunk, along with the marginal mandibular branch and the cervical branch supplying the platysma. After completing the dissection, we have painted the nerves for better visualization. The temporal, zygomatic, parotid duct, upper and lower buccal branches, the marginal mandibular branch, the platysma which was reflected to expose the cervical branch,